Today, we're digging into Natasha Trethewey's incredible Pulitzer Prize-winning poetry collection, Native Guard. This book is, well, it's really about two different kinds of wounds. One is deeply, deeply personal, and the other is this huge historical one. And what's so amazing is how Trethewey shows us the haunting ways they actually bleed into each other. So, what does connect a mother's murder to the Civil War? I mean, think about it. You've got a daughter grieving her mother, and then you have this forgotten black regiment from the 1860s. At first glance, they seem like they're from completely different universes, right? But this is where Natasha Trethewey's genius really shines. She shows us exactly how these two stories are not just related, but deeply, fundamentally intertwined. The whole book is really built on these two powerful parallel tracks. You've got the daughter's grief, this incredibly private, personal elegy for her mother. And then, at the same time, you have this forgotten history, a kind of public monument for a black Civil War regiment that was basically wiped from the record. The real magic of this collection is how she masterfully braids those two threads together into one story. All right, let's dive into that first thread, the personal wound. This is where Trethewey is really grappling with the aftermath of her mother's murder. She's wrestling with just how slippery memory can be, and all the grief that just hangs around. And she asks this really big question throughout the poems. What can we actually trust to tell us the truth about the past? I mean, we have physical things, right? Photographs, documents. But Trethewey looks at this kind of evidence and just pulls it apart. She shows us how tragically incomplete these things are, especially when what they're hiding is the brutal reality of domestic violence. So really, can a photograph tell the whole truth? A perfect example of this is her poem, Photograph, Ice Storm 1971. On the surface, it's just describing a really beautiful, kind of magical family photo. But the whole point of the poem is to make you ask, okay, but what is the camera not showing us? What's the real story hidden just outside the frame? And then you get these devastating final lines. The photo has all the facts on the back, names, date, event, but it says nothing about the real story, the violence happening inside. That beautiful, strange place of the ice storm, it becomes this absolutely chilling metaphor for a memory that just freezes a pretty surface in place while hiding this dark, painful truth right underneath. And it's not just photos. Trethewey takes this idea and applies it to official documents, too. In another poem, What is Evidence, she describes a death certificate with a smeared signature and ink that's fading. It's like these official papers are just these flimsy, totally inadequate records that just can't begin to capture the brutal physical reality of what happened. So this idea of incomplete records, of things that don't tell the whole story, that's the perfect bridge from the personal wound to the public one. Because now, Trethewey shifts her focus. She moves from the failures of private memory to the deliberate erasure of public history. And her focus lands squarely on the Louisiana Native Guards. Now, this was one of the very first all-black regiments to fight for the Union Army. A huge deal. But their story, their incredible sacrifice, it was systematically buried, erased, by a South that was dead set on rewriting its own history. You see this so clearly in her elegy for the Native Guards. She describes visiting a fort where there's a plaque honoring Confederate soldiers, their names raised hard in bronze. But the graves of the black Union soldiers who also died there, they've been completely washed away by the sea. It's just this gut punch of a metaphor for who history chooses to remember and who it chooses to forget. So what do you do when the stone monuments are either missing or, only telling one side of the story? Well, Trethewey's answer is to build a new kind of monument herself. The entire central section of the book is this incredible sequence of sonnets, also called Native Guard, and it basically becomes a monument made of words. It gives a voice back to one of those forgotten soldiers. And this line from that sequence really just captures the whole project perfectly. It's a stark acknowledgement of the selective, even brutal process of how official history gets made. So her poetry becomes a kind of direct intervention. It's an act of writing down the names that were never carved in stone. Okay, so we've got these two parallel stories, right? A mother's hidden pain on one side, a regiment's buried history on the other. And now we get to the most crucial part, how she connects them. This is where it all comes together. Trethewey argues that when photographs lie and monuments crumble to dust, there is one archive left that tells the absolute, undeniable truth. And that archive is the human body itself. For Trithwi, the body is the ultimate, most reliable piece of evidence. It's the landscape or the true history of trauma. Both the personal and the public gets permanently inscribed. Remember the poem, What is Evidence? She comes back to it here, basically dismissing those fading documents. She says the only real proof of her mother's suffering was right there, on the landscape of her body, the splintered clavicle, the pierced temporal. That is a truth that you just can't cover up or erase. And then, almost immediately, she gives us this image from the Native Guard poems. A soldier sees the whip scars on another man's back, and he describes them as crosshatched, just like the lines of ink in the journal he's writing in. It's just this incredibly powerful link, isn't it? The act of writing history and the history that's already been written on the body by violence. And there it is. That's the braid. The mother's broken bones from private trauma and the soldier's scarred back from public, historical trauma. They become the exact same kind of evidence. They are both irrefutable physical truths that the official records, whether it's a family photo or a military history book, completely ignore. So, after all this, where does that leave the poet herself? As the person who inherited both of these histories? Well, in the final section of the book, she brings it all home. She synthesizes these wounds by claiming her own identity, right in the middle of the very landscape that tried to deny her existence. It all culminates in the final poem, South. She returns to her home state of Mississippi. And think about this. As a biracial woman, the child of a marriage that was literally illegal there, her own body is the living, breathing intersection of these public and private histories of erasure. She herself is the very story that the South tried to outlaw. And with these final, defiant lines, she reclaims everything. She takes the hateful labels that were thrown at her, mulatto, half-breed, and she turns them on their head. She declares herself native, right there in her native land, powerfully asserting her right to belong to a place that literally tried to legislate her out of existence. Ultimately, Trithwi's work leaves us with this powerful question, doesn't it? By showing us how to dig up these stories, the ones buried in our own families and in our nation's past, she's really challenging all of us. She makes us wonder, what monuments do we need to build? And what truths are waiting right now in our own histories, waiting to finally be told?